What's up, y'all? Welcome to Draft Sickos here on the No Ceilings NBA YouTube channel, live and the podcast feed. I'm Stephen Gillespie. I'm without my co-host Maxwell Baumbach. Everything's fine. There's just a lot of, life, like holidays and stuff like that coming up in the draft cycle right now. So people are in and out, but I would never do you guys wrong. I would never just come on here by myself. Actually, I lie. I've done that before. But I do have a very special guest today. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching, you see him. If you're listening, I have with me the writer of the Motor City Hoops Substack. He's part of the Pistons Pulse podcast with Maury Sankofa, co-host of the Game Theory podcast with Sam Vecenie, and is also kind of like freelance doing work with like Knicks Film School and all that too. Ladies and gentlemen, my friend Bryce Simon. Bryce, how we doing today, brother?
What's up, Steven? How are you? Yeah, the Knicks Film School thing is a little bit random, but after that series, I got to know, Andrew Claudio, GMAC, helps with Game Theory. He's part of Knicks Film School. After the series, it's like, dude, I don't want to stop doing video breakdowns. Like, I really enjoy doing this. Can I moonlight over on Knicks Film School through their playoff run? And they were like, yeah, sure. So got a couple breakdowns over there. Probably won't do one this weekend because, as you said, life happens. Mother's Day on Sunday. We were talking before, I have high school graduation I have to go to today for, kids I coached and taught. And so, but yeah, doing a lot. The basketball world is awesome right now. The playoffs have been absolutely incredible in a chaotic sort of way, which is crazy. And then NBA draft is really starting to heat up, right, Steven? We have the combines going to get rolling. We have the lottery on Monday, really random Monday NBA draft lottery. But yeah, it's an exciting time.
It sure is, man. And it's been fun. First off, just the amount of stuff that you've been doing, man, like I would say over the past 2 years, like your glow up, if I could say that, your glow up's been awesome to see, man. And it's just been awesome to see you branching out. And you also do, work with a kind of mutual friend of ours, Keith Smith, for his Substack, and you get on his show and talk with him too.
Keith is the best, man. There's nobody better than Keith.
Oh, for sure. But first off, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers listening, and for everybody who has a mom in their life, which should be almost everybody. Call your mom this weekend and tell her happy Mother's Day. It's the least you can do. All right, so won't get super sappy. Bryce, let's start with the Detroit Pistons. Obviously, like if everyone watching, you see the Detroit Pistons kind of in the background here. We know that you're a Pistons guy. There's been so many of the young guys stepping up this year for Detroit. I mean, huge swing between last season to this season. How has your approach for evaluating these players now that they're taking this next step in their progression, how has that evolved as the season has gone on?
Yeah, for Pistons players specifically, or as my NBA draft evaluation?
Let's do Pistons first. Just like, how are you looking at guys like Saraf and Cade and them?
So Cade, listen, I always thought Cade had this in him. I thought when the Pistons landed the number 1 pick in that draft, he was the guy. He was the face of the franchise type player. And, he didn't necessarily show that through his first 3 years, right? And we can go into a myriad of why and how and all of that. I never lost faith, but I thought this year the NBA world collectively was able to see what Cade Cunningham is, possible of. I think he's going to be all NBA. I had him second team all NBA on my final ballot. That's not official. It's not like I have a vote or something.
Sure it is. It's official.
Sure. But and in the playoffs, I thought he showed out. Now, here's the thing. There are some things he has to work on. The turnovers are an issue. The three-point shooting really showed up as a negative in the playoffs. He needs to continue to grow around the rim. But, he's a two-way player. He does a little bit of everything. He creates all of that. So my thing with Cade is I think we know the level he can be, and that's your best player on a really good team, a true playoff contender. And I always think that's the most important part of team building is getting that guy. So that's where I'm at with Cade. What did you think about Cade this year? And, going back, I don't know if you were heavy in the NBA draft stuff then yet or not. I know I was just just kind of chill with it other than Pistons specific.
Yeah, I really kind of broke in. It seems like everyone is like the class of 2020 draft classes where a lot of the media folks now kind of like really cut their teeth. Right. For obvious reasons. But I mean, obviously I've been a basketball fan the majority of my life now. You pay attention to who's good in college, watch March Madness and all that stuff. Cade was so interesting coming in. And what really has been the interesting part for him is the development of his jumper. And I think that we saw that really kind of bears fruit a lot this year. And when I was evaluating last year's class with Stephon Castle, I wrote this piece about how if you're drafting a player number 1 and you feel like you can work the jumper, just because they're not shooting great in college doesn't mean that they can't improve over time. And it was funny because I broke down like the past few number 1 picks, and Cade was one of these guys where he shot great in college, and then it took him a little bit in the pros. He was kind of like one of these oddities, whereas a lot of the people that I featured in this piece were kind of poor shooters in college, but over time got better. But Cade is just like this huge developmental case where you can say, hey, give these guys a little bit of time, especially if you put in context like team construct and stuff like that. But I don't know. I don't know if I ever really was either on or off a Kane bandwagon. I was just kind of like, I want to wait and see what's going to go on with this guy, because you got to put into context, like I said, the team.
So that's my advantage with the Cade stuff, though, is I've literally watched every second of his NBA career, and I've studied and analyzed and broke down and wrote articles on every roster move around him, because that's my job at Motor City Hoops and the Pistons Pulse. And I'm not saying that to be like arrogant. I'm just saying like that is the one team in the NBA where I truly, pun intended, have the pulse of everything that is going on. And so I had the advantage of, whenever we said Cade had no spacing, I actually watched it play out for 48 minutes of every single game. He, not 48 minutes, but people know what I'm saying.
Sure.
So, Jaden Ivey, this is tough. This is what's interesting with you. You text me about this. I made a comment on a recent mock about a guy paying off on his rookie contract, right? For the team that drafted him. And what's interesting is how quickly those decisions come up, Steven. Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren are extension eligible this offseason for the Detroit Pistons. And what's crazy is I don't think the Pistons have enough information to know what contract to offer them, especially on Jaden Ivey, because he got hurt 30 games into the season. At time of injury, he was shooting over 40% from 3, but he had also been on a heater the last 5 or 6 games before that injury. I've always been a J.I. guy, but are you going to pay him like a number 2 option if you don't know he's a number 2 option? Do you want to pay him like a 6th man? And is J.I. ready to accept 6-man responsibilities? Is that his ultimate? So J.I. is a tough one. And Jalen Duren is another one where
we were big Duren guys.
I was a huge Duren guy. Yeah. Like it was really interesting. And, I know we're going to talk about like, what have you learned? How do you evaluate different? He's an interesting one. It's like, how long do you keep saying he's young, Steven? Like this is it's
till he's old, Bryce.
Yeah, what is old? And it was Killian Hayes, right? Like it's not even about age. It's like, at what point is it no longer he hasn't got the reps? I guess is more my point.
The developmental process.
Correct.
How many years do you want to be invested in it?
It was like, oh well, Killian Hayes is still only 20. Killian Hayes is still only 21. I'm like, yeah, he's not getting better though. Like, point to me where I should feel comfortable. JD's a little different because JD did take a step forward this year, especially defensively. Wasn't a huge step. He's not an anchor of your defense, but there was a step forward. And so those guys are interesting. Ron is, still just 1 year. I do think it's impressive that Ron Holland played 81 games, would have played 82 if not for Nick's suspension, for a team that was 6th in the East and took the Knicks to a really competitive series. And Ron played every regular season for them as a rookie. I think that says something. I don't know what, but it says something, something positive. Asar is the most fascinating because Asar and Amin are I'm waiting for an NBA person to yell at me for, well, why didn't all you have Asar Thompson and Amin Thompson higher? And I'm going to throw back at them. You yell at me for not ranking people that can shoot the ball higher. And those two are the ultimate. All of this other stuff looks good, but they can't shoot the ball. Is it going to work if they can't shoot it? And they've both found ways to be quality NBA basketball, better than quality, without being able to shoot a lick, Steven, a lick. Now, they're both outlier athletes, and that's a huge part of it. But Asar is interesting because I think he's incredible defensively. That's another thing. I didn't love their defense at OTE. I was a little worried about, like, are they going to be solid? Do they do the foundational stuff? Are they just going to get beat by taking chances all the time? And they do disrupt, but they also really guard. And so they're fascinating to like think back to what I thought about them pre-draft and then what they're kind of turning into, both Amin and Asar.
It's interesting with the Thompson twins because for whatever reason this year, Bryce, like I have been diving into like NFL draft content just because I think it's fun to kind of take a break, but there's also so many similarities.
Do you think it's easier? I've always said I thought it was easier because like if you're evaluating a left tackle, you have very specific constructs to this is what a left tackle needs to do, and it's exactly the same as what he'll have to do in the NFL. That's not necessarily the case with basketball, right? Because the position is so, ebb and flow, and you could be this or that, or like when we talk about Derik Queen, this will come into play. Yeah. So do you find it easier to evaluate, or is it harder?
I think at face value, it seems easier, but the more that I've listened to, like a whole bunch of different people, there's so many variations of what a left tackle does, and it's made me appreciate it more. There's different like blocking schemes. And stuff. I mean, you know this, like zone blocking, straight up, man in front, guard your yard blocking and stuff like that. It's been interesting. But the reason I brought this up was because one thing that I constantly hear in NFL draft that I do think there's some truth in the NBA is you draft traits. Yeah. And I think that that's what you hear with the Thompson twins. It wasn't the film that you see because they have outlier athleticism, outlier length, they have the traits to be good in a number of areas. And you're seeing that kind of bears fruit out now.
And not to mention, this is where I struggle. And so for anybody who like listens to me, I pretty much don't take into account intel. And the reason is I don't think it's fair to every player I rank because I'm not as connected as No Ceilings. I'm not as connected as Sam Vecenie. And so I may hear a few things on one or two guys. Like I'll give an example. Like I had heard about Cam Whitmore's knee thing, but I didn't drop him because I'm like, I'm not going to play the intel game. And so where I was going is the intel on Asar and Amin were just like great kids, hard workers, and all of that. And my point is that stuff really matters, Steven. Like it really matters. And we don't always get a look into that with all of these guys. We don't know what their mentality is. We don't know how their interviews went. And all of that stuff, it's part of great. Here's the other thing though. We're talking about 18-year-olds sometimes, 19-year-olds. You know what those kids do? They grow up and mature. And when a kid grows up and matures, maybe he gets more consistent with his workout routine or his diet or his nutrition or how serious he takes the game. And maybe he doesn't, but that's such a huge part of this that I kind of just said, I know it's important, but I leave it away because I don't get a chance to sit down in a room with 75 of these potential draft prospects and figure out whether I believe in the maturity, the personality, the work ethic, those. And you can't do that in an hour anyway, right? Like that's where I think draft teams probably have to rely on their college connections. You call up said college coach, hey, whoever, John Shire, shoot me straight. Like, is Cooper really all of these things that we're all saying, or is it different behind the scenes, And then it puts those guys in a tough spot because that's your guy, that's your kid, that you just won you a bunch of college games. It's all of the different relationships, aspects of all of this is fascinating to me, and it's true for the NFL as well.
Yeah, and you hear stories all the time about like someone would say something negative intel-wise on a player, but then they grow out of it, just like you said, because of their age. And I think it's great that you made that distinction of not that intel is not important, but if you only get let's just say like you get all the intel on Ace Bailey, but you get none on VJ Edgecombe. Are you just going to bump Ace Bailey because you have a known, thing there while there's an unknown variable with VJ Edgecombe? I think that's a great distinction.
How fair is that, right? And so like to me, I just throw it all out. Like I just throw it all out. I do hear some things, like I said, like eventually I heard about the Cam Whitmore thing, but I'm like, that's not fair. What if somebody else? What if Jarris Walker had a knee thing also, and I just didn't know about it, and so I dropped Cam to 15. I mean, I wouldn't have dropped him as low as he ended up going, but that's a whole other evaluation conversation. I was a huge Cam Whitmore guy, but it just there are those factors through all of it, and it is a very important aspect for him. You know what else I found? Now we're just getting into random stuff.
Hey, it's cool, man. I like this.
Talking to a handful of scouts that I do know with different teams. Their job is so much different because they can say to me, they'll be like, I don't like this guy. And I'm like, why? And they're like, well, our coach would never play him. And it clicked. Like, they're evaluating for a very, very specific head coach scheme, offensively, defensively, roster construction. In some ways, Steven, you and I and everybody else, our big board construction is a little bit more difficult because we're trying to do it for like a general concept of what the NBA is. If you told me, hey, you have Luka Doncic and you have this player, what do you need to draft to build around him? Well, okay, does it have a lob threat center? No? Okay, well, those guys are rising up my personal big board for that said team. Does it have a 3-and-D wing? No? Well, those guys, and some of these generally would as well, but some teams don't want a lob threat center. They want to stretch big or vice versa, or, they already have plenty of creators. So how is Ben Saraf going to fit into that scheme whenever they already have? So it's another interesting aspect where if you were a little bit more confined, in terms of, hey, we know our guy won't play somebody that doesn't play defense well, we'll throw out all of these guys that are awesome offensively but have defensive question marks.
That's all fair, dude. And putting players into a specific context, like how we've been saying, Bryce, I feel like is key. And I don't know if you've been watching the Scout mini series that is on YouTube for the Brooklyn Nets. Highly recommended, dude. It's actually like the first episode was like pretty enlightening. I mean, nothing crazy mind blowing that I was like, oh wow, I've never would have thought of that before. But just hearing an NBA team be so open about like their scouting process and what they value. One thing that they said was the difference in scouting between an 82 game player and a 16 game player.
I love it. I love that thought.
Yeah, and I think it's a
what did they say? Did they value 82 game players? Like, did they see value in them, or was it like essentially we're looking for 16 game players?
They didn't necessarily say that, but what they said is when the time comes when we are in the playoffs, we want to essentially like what I derived from it was that when they are ready to make the playoffs, they need to make sure that they have 16 game players because it doesn't do you look good to be great in the regular season and then flame out in the playoffs, right? And we're seeing that now in the playoffs, Bryce. So the thing that I want to kind of ask you now is watching the way that the playoffs have been played this year, dude, the playoffs have been some of the best playoffs that I've ever seen. It's just wild, dude. It's so crazy. It feels almost like a different sport. So putting that into context, Bryce, like how has watching the playoffs, has it impacted the way that you're looking at some of the players in this year's draft class?
Yeah, so I struggle with this a little bit. I also want to say, like, I didn't want to make it sound like I think people that scout for specific NBA teams have an easier job because the pressure and the stress on them getting it right is way more. Like, I can whiff and my wife still loves me and I still get all the same amount of money in terms of how I earn my money as a teacher and all of that. I'm just saying it's different context.
They have a formula that they're trying to follow.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah. And it just changes how you rank players. That's I had to learn. That's why I could talk to one guy that has Derik Queen at 5 and another guy that has like, we would never draft Derik Queen. It's like, what? And it's like, he would never play for, I'm just using Derik Queen as an example because we're going to talk about him soon. So the first thing is physicality. Like that is this playoffs. And so that makes me, whenever I watch players, one thing I've really looked for this year is, can you hold your line? If you are an offensive player driving, can you hold your line versus physicality from the defender? And if you're a defender at the point of attack, can you hold that line as a defender and not get bumped off by the offensive player? So that is definitely one thing. Another thing that I've been told that I've overvalued at times, that I will just stand, put my foot in the ground, plant my flag, whatever. Yeah. I value rebounding. Like, and when I say rebounding, I don't mean just like big time rebounds, like Josh Hart rebounds. I'm like, I love Josh Hart right now. It's just like this dude makes momentum winning plays. How many of these games, you're talking about how crazy they are, how many of them have come down to a missed free throw checkout, right? Like, listen, I love Jared Allen. He missed a checkout on Miles Turner the other day that led to the Tyrese Halliburton 3-point win. The 3-pointer at the buzzer or whatever it was late in that game. I've just seen it consistently happen. And so guys that get like true box outs, really attack boards on both ends of the floor, all of that show really, really valuable to me. So guys that can, I think physicality of their play and rebounding is a couple things that have stood out to me so far in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's something that Maxwell and I have been harping on. It feels like for the past 2 years, it's like it's great that this player's hypothetical. It's aesthetically neat to watch this, a 7'7" player that weighs 85 pounds can hit a jumper, but can he go out there and go in there and do the dirty work, right? And something that I was watching even just yesterday, this isn't in my notes or anything, but when I was watching the Pacers play against Cleveland, I'm watching TJ McConnell. And this guy's been in the league for 10 years, and he's a sub 35% shooter from deep, but he has the utmost trust in his head coach. And it's because he does, and this is a guard, right? This isn't even just big men.
Three times,
right? Like he won't hit jumpers, but he pushes the break. He is heads up looking for teammates. He gets offensive rebounds as a guard, right? And he defends his tail off, and he's listed at 6'1". He's probably a little shorter than that, right? He's older, so he's shrinking, right? So he's it's just funny. I tweeted out that I think if you were a sub 6'4" guard, TJ McConnell is like the requisite, and you can even put like what we're seeing from Pat Spencer for Golden State this year. If you're watching these two guys, like this is the minimum threshold that you have to achieve if you're going to be a sub 6'4" guard.
So the 3 times was the rebounding stuff. I have it in my notes from that game. He didn't come up. I don't even know how many rebounds he has in the box score, but 3 different times he knocked a rebound away from the other team in some capacity that created either a defensive rebound for his team or an offensive rebound second chance opportunity for his team. This is so I thought of 2 names as we're talking about this.
Okay.
As we talked about like the physicality and this rebounding aspect. Common Malawach comes to mind because is Common going to be able to hold up physically? And again, these guys can get stronger, so it doesn't mean that there's like. But right now, if I would be worried that he's like going to be pushed around on rebounds, and I think his hands can be an issue at times. Where again, this is the Rudy Gobert thing. Rudy Gobert doesn't get played off the floor defensively. Rudy Gobert if he does get played off, it's because he's not taking advantage of the small lineups offensively, because he drops passes and he gets it tipped away and he brings it down and all of that.
Plays smaller than he is.
Correct, especially offensively. So with Common, that would be like, that's one of my concerns is he going to get the big rebounds? Common's going to engulf rebounds because he's 7 foot and athletic and all of these things.
Huge, yeah.
But is he going to get all of the big ones, like in the biggest moments throughout a game? And then is he going to be able to finish? Is he going to catch everything? The small guard thing. I literally have this written in my Walter Clayton Jr. scout in terms of you won't find me denying the offensive ability. Is Walter Clayton going to be willing to turn into a TJ McConnell energy defender? Is he going to dig? Is he going to take charges? Is he going to rotate from the weak side and knock away an offensive rebound opportunity from a 6'10" guy? Like, will Walter Clayton do all of those? I'm not saying he won't. I'm saying I think that might ultimately determine how successful he is in the NBA if he gets all of those quote unquote little guard traits that we're talking about.
Yeah, and it's the reason why I'm so high on his teammate Elijah Martin this year.
Absolutely, sure.
He does the TJ McConnell things, on top of improving as an offensive player. I think that even though he's that sub 6'4" size, he can rebound, he defends, he makes the next pass. He's a guy you want in a foxhole, right? Like going back to these NFL, kind of parallels. He's a foxhole guy. He's a guy that you would go to war with. And that's why I'm so high on him this year.
It's funny as you bring up 82 versus 16, there's a world where Walter Clayton Jr. is an 82 game player and Elijah Martin's actually the better 16 game player, right?
Yeah.
I have Walter Clayton Jr. in my first round. I have Walter Clayton Jr. at 22. I have Elijah Martin more so like second round. But if you told me those worlds exist, I don't know that I would disagree. Like, I think those worlds exist where that could happen. There's also a world where Walter Clayton Jr. does like all of those other things and becomes a TJ McConnell.
Is that a Harry Potter reference?
I mean, listen, it wouldn't take me very far to go get some Harry Potter memorabilia to show the crowd. But they do things differently offensively, McConnell and Walter Clayton. But I love the idea of the 82 versus 16. And I think I lean a little bit more towards I do value 82 game players as long as an organization you understand that you have 82 game players and you have the mechanisms to then shrink your rotation come playoffs or whatever you need to do. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
You can't be counting on an 82 game guy to be your sixth man in the playoffs. You have to have a different, plan for that. But it is an interesting concept. I'm glad the NBA teams talk about it that way too. That makes me feel better.
Yeah, and again, I think that the series that they're doing is pretty enlightening, and you get some affirmations and some neat little coach talk out of it too. So it's pretty cool. So Bryce, I want to ask you now. We're going to shift more so to the draft class now,
okay,
and a little bit more away from the NBA. We can obviously draw parallels or whatever, right? But what are your overall thoughts on this draft class? Because I feel like obviously number one, Cooper Flagg, right? And then if we put that, we just table him, and this is almost disrespectful to Cooper. I feel like every draft podcast that I listen to is like, all right, cool, Cooper Flagg, you're great. Let's talk about other people, right? Yeah, exactly. What would you say like the strengths of this draft class are? And then what would you be afraid of needing coming into the draft, right? So if you were looking for a specific skill set but this class didn't have it, like what would that skill set be?
Okay, so I think the strength is right at the top. I feel very confident, very comfortable if you get the number one pick. And thank you, Mr. Ray. And I think if you get number two, you feel pretty comfortable about that as well. I've really come around on Dylan Harper, feeling really good about him just being like, hey, this is what a quote unquote number two pick should look like. Like I'm cool with that. I get nervous after that, to be honest with you, Steven. Like I don't. Here's why I get nervous. Whoever
the Ace fans are going to be coming for you now.
Yeah.
Just to let you know, I'm sure you're ready.
Yeah, I am. Listen, Ace is number 3 on my board. To be clear, we didn't plan on talking about Ace, but we guess we can get into it. Here's what makes me nervous about Ace a little bit is like, does it become the Jabari Smith Jr. thing where like, what is the handle good enough to open up everything else in his game? And so, it's
still
just
a good player, by the way. Jabari's still a good player, not a potential number one guy though.
Correct. Right? And that's what I had Ace number 1 on my board at times before the season. Like I thought he was going to come in and just because he is your prototypical two-way wing. Like that's why he's very solidly number 3 for me. I would say probably, I don't know what percentage of teams I would still take him over VJ at number 3. I'm not as high on 3, 4, 5 in there. I think it takes a little while for it to balance back out. And I've come around on some of these guys in the lottery. Middle of the first round is okay. I think when I look at the middle of the first round, like you ask about specific skill sets, shooting is a little like wing shooting is something that like at times I'm like, man, I really want to send this team some floor spacing, some shooting. That can get a little tricky in that range. There's some guys at the end of the first I've come around on as well. I would say the archetype that I don't see here at all that I love is the stretch big. Like that guy, I don't think really, depending on what you think about a few of them in their development, I don't know that guy really exists in the first round for me. I mean, really, like I would have to get to Maxime Renault, I think, to get to one. Again, it depends on what you think about Derik Queen, developing that. I mean,
Danny Wolf.
So it's interesting. Like with Wolf, we're going to talk about him, I guess, so I can save that. But that archetype that I value a lot, like the Miles Turner, the Brooke Lopez, the like Chet, like all of those. I just think it's such a
Victor,
Kristaps, all of those guys. Mm-hmm. It's not an archetype you really see in this class. Like that's why I was so high on Sar, and I don't know if he ends up getting there or not. We'll see, but it's just an archetype that I really, really value, and I don't know that there is necessarily one of those guys that I believe in a ton in the first round. So
I think that's fair too, and there are people even with the no ceilings, where some of us are pretty high on Maxime Renault. I saw Rafael Barlow, very well respected, kind of forward-facing public scout, is pushing Renault like lottery level, right? And when I see that, it makes me feel bad for where I have him, where I kind of have him like mid to late second round, because
Sure.
sometimes I feel like he's just kind of soft, you know. And I
Yeah.
saw him play in person against Georgia Tech, and they had Abraham Soiree, who's like 6'8", 200 pounds, soaking wet, like really stifling him. And so when I see stuff like that, it kind of gives me a brain splinter where that's like the only thing that I can focus on and remember, and I have to go back and watch film and stuff like that. It's kind of, I would say that's like the negative, if there is a negative at all, public scouting, you know, like in-person scouting, is that one time that you see a player that really sways like my opinion on a player.
It's hard. You have to push it out of your mind. I won't bring up the player because I don't want to talk about the exact reason, because it was kind of some off the court stuff. But I did that. There was a player that happened with me this year. I was a little lower on them, and eventually I had to push an experience out of my mind. Like, this is, you know, and they've climbed up my boards over time, or up my board over time. But it is hard at times to like differentiate, you know, compartmentalize, like get rid of some of that. And it's like, okay, was that a one-time thing? You know, whatever. I mean, that's the other thing is, you know, maybe one of the games you watch, a kid is sick, or he's dealing with an injury that is undisclosed, or you don't realize, or, you know, whatever. I've kind of split the difference with Renault. Sam is definitely much lower. He's more in your range with Renault. I have Renault like into first, top of second tier for me, but I've talked to an NBA scout that has him in the same, like, Bryce, like, you know, would you ever push him up into the lottery? And I'm like, I don't think so. I don't know that I can get him there, but it sounds like they had him mid first round. And so that has also made me feel better. Steven, I don't know how you feel, but this is why we should all be respectful of each other's big boards. Like, I look at some big boards and I'm like, you know what? I don't agree with this at all, but I don't like comment or DM the person, be like, hey, you're an idiot, or what are you doing, or whatever.
What are you thinking?
Yeah. Because again, I've talked to NBA scouts that have people at 5 and another scout that had them at 30. And if guys that are getting paid full-time jobs can be that far different on players, I think
all they're doing is watching these guys.
That's all they're doing.
That's their only thing that they're doing in life.
Then those of us in this public space, I think, can respect each other's big boards, especially the work. Like, that's what I always say. You can disagree with my opinion. Please do it respectfully, and at least respect that I put in the work. And I can prove that I've done the work, because I can show you my notes and notes and notes and pages of that stuff. If you want to disagree and have a conversation, great. But let's all respect what, you know, like, I love you guys at No Ceilings. I have great personal relationships with many of you. Sometimes I'm like, man, what are they seeing that I'm not? You know, like, why is that there? But I know you guys put in the work, so I'm not going to judge it. Like, it is like, I know what you guys are doing over there. So we can all have differing opinions, but let's respect them, because it's a subjective job. Like, it's so like, there's nothing objective about it for most things, I guess. If you want to throw stats at me, that
Sure.
is, but
people never disagree about stats. You're right. So Bryce, let's get specific here. And you gave me a list of players that you have deemed to be like your interesting scouts. This doesn't mean that you're super duper high or super duper low, right? It could be. Yeah. We're going to learn that a little bit, right? So the first one that you sent me is my favorite player, so please be nice to me. Derik Queen, out of Maryland, the big man. He's listed at 6'10", 230 pounds, 20 years old, so a little bit older than some of these other freshmen in this class. He averaged over 16 points per game, 9 rebounds, almost 2 assists, over a block and a steal per game, shooting 52, 20, 77% from the floor, almost 2.5 turnovers per game, and just over 2 fouls per game. Bryce, what makes him an interesting prospect for you?
Okay, so just to get this out of the way, one, like, for the Ace Bailey, I still have Ace Bailey 3, because of he is a real potential two-way player. I don't know that he has number 1 option on your team. I think he definitely could be like a 3rd option, maybe a number 2. VJ 4, I've kind of, bought into Trey Johnson. I have Derik Queen 6, I guess, is what I'm trying to get to here. So Derik Queen is very much there. I would not take him over Ace or VJ, but I could take him as high as 5 based on how my tiers break down and stuff like that. And I guess theoretically as low as 11, although there's guys in the tiers I definitely would not take ahead of him. So he wouldn't drop that low for me. I have him as a team specific versatile creation big. Like, is that fair?
I like that. Yeah. I think that works.
Here's what makes me nervous with Derik Queen is, like, I think this is a scary archetype for me. Because it's like, if you can't do those things, what are you? What do you become? Like, you have to be able. But what I bought into the more I watched is this dude is so skilled. He is so much fun to watch on the offensive end. His ability off the bounce. He has Euro steps. He has bumps. He has floaters, left-hand finishes. He draws fouls. He covers a ton of ground with his first step. I think I buy him being able to do it at the next level. Loves the spin move. He's really good getting his momentum on the catch. So, like, he actually does a nice job on cuts and short rolls and in the dunker spot. He knows he's not like this crazy vertical pop guy, so he catches the ball with momentum and gets his finish quick. And so I think I buy the scoring, Steven. Okay. And I think I buy that he's eventually going to shoot it as well. Like, I think it eventually gets there in some capacity. So he's a high-level processor. He's going to destroy people with transition outlet passes, all of that stuff. I think he's good in ball screens outside of he's not a lob threat. So that's where I say he's a little team-specific in terms of, if you need to find Luka Doncic a lob threat like Derik Queen like Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford, Derik Queen may not be your guy. Now, him short roll decision making out of Luka.
Some other fun concepts for sure. Yeah.
It could be a lot of fun. And then the defense is like, I think he's going to have to, I think his path to that is like Şengün style of like position, hand activity, play with great verticality, all of that. Şengün has turned himself into a really quality defender on a great defensive team. I don't know if Queen ever gets there. Now, I did have somebody reach out to me that just wanted me to understand Queen's size is a little bit limiting overall in terms of prototypical centers in the NBA, in terms of like his wingspan and standing reach. That does make me a little bit nervous in terms of, if I'm talking about position, hand activity is his path defensively, that wingspan and those things do end up mattering in regards to that specifically.
I think that that's all fair and great breakdown too, right? How do you feel about the way that the NBA game is being played now, where everything's cyclical, right? Like, for a long time, big men were the ugly wart on the face of the NBA, right? And now we're seeing, and it's funny, I was listening to the Ron Russillo podcast the other day, and he was laughing at the term, the two big man concept, right? Like the double big lineup. And he was like, when I was growing up, it was just called a power forward and a center, right? So what do you think about Queen's ability to kind of be versatile on the front court, to where his skill set offers him, I think, a lot of ability to play with a traditional big man in a lot of ways, but also kind of a smaller lineup big man in a lot of ways as well?
All right, so here are my notes. So after I put team-specific versatile creation big man, I put the worst case is he's a third big in the Bobby Portis, Naz Reid type of role. I'm not saying I'm not saying he's those type of players. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, think about what rotation role Bobby Portis plays for the healthy Milwaukee Bucks. Think about the role and rotation that Naz Reid plays for the Minnesota Timberwolves. I think that is the worst case for Derik Queen. Like, he ends up being like Naz Reid, Bobby Portis, but doing it differently offensively. Here's the upside, is he fits perfectly in the starting lineup with another quote unquote big and plays great off your primary initiator, right? That is the upside. That is the ceiling that he has, which is really exciting, because to your point, I think the trend in the NBA right now is play as big as possible without compromising skill and theoretically floor spacing. But if we've learned anything from the Cleveland Cavaliers, it's you can make two. Yes, Evan Mobley's improved his jumper, but they also make that work. And his strength. But they've made that work because Mobley can do what? He can put it on the deck now because of his strength, and because those two guys pass the ball really well to each other. Again, to use a Pistons perspective, Duran and Asar work together whenever they're passing the ball well, and they stay out of each other's way off the ball. They like to occupy the same space.
Yes.
I think Derik Queen is a good processor, court mapper, whatever you want to say. He's a good passer. I just talked about the quick finishes and all of that stuff. So I think there's a path to that working, maybe in a starting lineup, but definitely if he ends up being your third big. And I think that's, in this class with the other players that are there, I think that's a top 10 value, especially for specific teams. I think it makes a lot of sense for specific teams.
Absolutely. And we saw him play well with a guy like Julian Reese this year, who is kind of also you could see him succeeding in some leagues, right? With either style of a big man as well. And I just thought that they played off each other in such a fantastic way. Bryce, the one thing that I want to touch on real quick is you brought up the 3-point potential.
Yeah. Where are you at on that?
I think it could get there. One,
Okay.
he's got great touch around the touch indicators, I think, are all there, right? And he has shown the ability to improve. Now, we're talking about a guy who only shot 20% from three, so some people can look at that and be like, why in the world are you guys talking this way? I think that the touch indicators are there. You look at him and he's 85th percentile finishing at the rim, and he ranked in the 74th percentile at rim attempts. So you're seeing, and it weren't all just dunks, although he did dunk a little bit. But he was also in the 81st percentile in mid-range shots too, right? So you're seeing him being able to extend it to the elbows and the mid-post, and the free throw touch, and the free throw indicators are there too, right? So if we're so confident in Kamal Malawach being able to develop his shot as a three-point shooter, I don't understand why a guy like Derik Queen can't also be looked in that same light.
Yeah. Listen, Common was my guy coming in. Like I thought he was going to be a top 5 pick, and I was really excited. I've kind
still
of
could be, by the way.
No, sure. I've soured a little bit on his stretchability too. Like if I had to pick, I don't know that I wouldn't pick Derik Queen, having just as much of a potential to do it. Just Steven, I did a project to look at Queen and break down his offensive game. The off the dribble stuff is silly. It's ridiculous.
Some DeMarcus Cousins like maybe light, because DeMarcus Cousins was a freak of nature, but kind of in that same mold, right?
It's unreal. And I'm just like watching that going, like, this would be the counter probably to playing him at the 4 a ton, is 4 men are going to be a little bit better defending that stuff, although he may have the physical advantage then in some of those matchups. But I'm just like, some of these 5s he's going to destroy them off the bounce. Like once he adjusts to everything. And, he's a winner. Like he's won everywhere. He's been very, very good, very successful. Playing
body transformation guy too, right?
Yeah.
Like
playing at
a lot better
Montverde.
shape.
And so that was another thing. Early in the year, I stayed sour on him because he played really short stints. Like he would play like 3 minutes sub, 3 minutes sub. And then, that kind of got better throughout the year. So a guy that really rose up my board, and I'm still not fully sure where I land on everything, but I'm definitely more excited than I was at one point with him.
Totally fair. All right, let's move on to another big man that coming into the year, Maxwell and I did this project where I forget who the full pool of players were. We were talking about big man prospects, but it consisted of a lot of people that were higher regarded in the class coming into the year. But the player I was most excited about was the guy that we're about to talk about, Danny Wolf, the 7-foot big man out of Michigan, 255 pounds, 21 years old, 13 points per game, almost 10 boards, over 3.5 assists, over 1 block and steal a game, 49 or roughly 50% from the floor, about 34% from deep, only 59% from the free throw line, over 3 turnovers per game, and about 2 fouls per game. Bryce, why is Danny Wolf on this list that you gave me, brother?
Yeah, because he's such an interesting type of player. He's another player that I've kind of adjusted. I went over on KOC's podcast, and we talked about Pistons, and then we talked about Jace Richardson and Danny Wolf. And This was a couple months ago, and at that time, I was higher on Jace Richardson than most, and I was a little bit lower on Danny Wolf than most. And I will say now at this point, I actually have Danny Wolf higher on my big board than Jace Richardson. And part of that is at the end of I think I told you this, at the end of the season, I did a little thing where I went back and watched every one of these guys' best statistical game and worst statistical game. And
you're big on that process.
Yeah,
too,
like I just, and to be clear, I watched them all season long. So it's not like this was the only tape I watched, but I'm like, to me, that's a little bit of what does this look like when it's at its best? What can this look like whenever it's at its worst? Because there's some guys that even if it's their worst game, it's like, well, that wasn't even, he just missed shots. Like process was right. He still defended. He rebounded. He created. He just missed shots. Well, that's a great sign and indicator to me. So Danny Wolf, versatile two-way front court player to me. I do think you have to get him on a team that will be creative with the way they use him, because he is a very creative player. I think he moves well along the perimeter for the size, and he falls right into what we just talked about in terms of size with skill. I don't see him as a true like 5-man where he's playing all of his minutes at center. Like I think he definitely needs to, like, you need to use him as a 4 playing alongside another big because he has so much versatility. You can watch a game, he's a pick and roll handler, the pick and roll man, pick and pop, ghost, and he moves, he cuts, he has spacing. We'll talk about the jumper.
Yeah.
I think he'll be able to attack closeouts. And then the passing is just like, I don't even know what to think. Because some of the passes are sick, like touch passes, eye manipulation, the court mapping, and then he throws some ridiculous ones in a very negative way. So it's really interesting there, but I think he moves well, and on defense that allows him to cover ground and all of those things. And so I don't know what I think about his defense as much, but I love the offensive versatility.
Oh yeah, and something that we're seeing a lot in the NBA, I was going to touch on this with Queen, but I think this is a good point. We can touch on it with Danny too, is Bryce, how much are you seeing specifically in the playoffs that NBA teams are looking to have the offense not finish with, but flow through the big men? And like, is that why you're kind of higher on these two guys?
Yeah, we see it some, like, so look, obviously Şengün got a lot. You even see OKC at times will play through Hartenstein in terms of like just letting him make plays from the elbow, the top of the key, stuff like that. So that does give me hope, or like not hope. Hope's the wrong word, but it makes these guys more interesting, I guess, because it's not just like, oh, these guys are just going to be used as ball screen guys for the the best player. Even Draymond, essentially he plays as the Warriors big in a lot of lineups. And so like Draymond has the ball while Steph and Jimmy or whoever are running off ball actions. Shoot, the Pistons did it with Jalen Duren, where they'll give him the ball at the top of the key. And then now, is it zoom action? Is it a backdoor? Is it a pass and follow? It may still end up in a ball screen, but these guys have to be able to handle the ball and feel comfortable with it in some capacity because they are running actions through them in those situations.
And we even see like micro doses of this too with guys like Jared Allen for the Cavaliers. Sure. Like he's relied upon to find Evan Mobley in the post where they do these high-low actions with each other.
Julius is doing it with Minnesota. We just talked about this on Game Theory like 8 hours ago that, putting the ball in Julius, because it's a different, what we said was Draymond's guarding Julius. So now Draymond's not being this off the ball, just best off ball defender in the NBA. You have him on the ball. If he neutralizes Julius, that's fine. But now he's not neutralizing Ant moving off the ball or Dante or, whoever. And so it gives you optionality when you have a big that can operate but also with like Danny, and I think with Derik Queen as well, these guys can cut off the ball and backdoor and do those different things that makes them, the versatility is what's exciting to me. And I think maybe I'll learn that I'm overvaluing that with some of these guys, but I do think it's important. I think it matters.
It absolutely does. You brought up that you want to talk about the jumper with Danny. And it's funny that you brought this up because sometimes I think numbers will kind of fog my brain about like what I think is on film. And I ask dumb questions all the time. They're actually my favorite questions to ask, or stupid questions. Is that, are we sure that Danny Wolf is going to be able to shoot it? And how much of that affects the draft process? Because I say only, right? He only shot 33.6%, and he hasn't really been a high volume, reliable knockdown shooter. And then you look at the free throws, they're a little concerning. And again, in quotations, I'll say only 63rd percentile at the rim while ranking in the same percentile as Derik Queen in at rim shooting frequency. So are we sure that Danny can shoot?
I am not, to answer your and as New Heights with Travis and Jason Kelsey, there are no dumb questions. They have a whole segment about it. No dumb questions. No,
your
I'm
teacher
not.
is showing, by the way.
Yeah. There you go. The mechanics are interesting as well, and I think we all learned our lesson with Tyrese Halliburton on just judging mechanics. Yeah. But when there are concerning numbers and there are concerning mechanics, that is a reason to question. And that's why I didn't bring him up. I'm sure people were yelling at me like, hey, what do you mean there's no stretch big archetype that you're talking about? I'm like, I don't put Danny Wolf in the I'm positive he's going to shoot it category. Like I don't feel that way. about him. You know, there are guys that I do like. I think Ace is going to make shots. I think VJ is probably going to make shots. Trey, Con, I think Carter Bryant shoots it. Like even if his number, and you know Liam McNeely. Like Liam's a guy where the numbers don't pop, but I think Liam was in a tough like context with you know their situation at Connecticut, where like he's trying to play on the ball, and that's not really his game, especially in the NBA. I don't feel that way about Danny Wolf. I think he can. He made enough to make me feel that there's a path, but I'm not going to sit here and say, I think we drafted him or I drafted him to the Thunder in our recent mock over at Game Theory. And like, yeah, dribble pass shoot is OKC's, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
I believe he does two of those things for sure. I'm not positive he does the third one, to your point.
And the conversation that I had with Maxwell, I'll probably say that I don't ever like to speak for people, but just kind of the gist of it, right, was that putting his season in the context, Michigan, and you can ask Metcalf here on our team, who's a big Wolverines guy. He'll tell you the same thing, is that the guards on Michigan weren't necessarily the best. And Danny Wolf operated probably for the first time ever in his career as like the de facto point guard on this team. So you put him in a new situation. And one stat on Synergy that I found is that he shot 36.7% on his guarded 3-pointers. So there's that little nugget in there, which makes the scout all that more difficult because you have to put all these things in a blender and just kind of see what you pour out, right?
Those Synergy numbers are the best because it's like, okay, he actually shot good unguarded. He shot awful on unguarded. Do I use that as a positive?
Yeah. What do you do with that? Yeah.
Because like my initial instinct is like, okay, like he didn't make some of these that he's normally going to make. So actually the percentage is going to be better. I should believe in it more. And I'm just talking in a vacuum, not necessarily Danny Wolf. But then it's also like, well, why didn't he make more unguarded catch and shoot three? You know, it just, as you said, I made the comment that stats can be objective. And as you pointed out, like, are they though? Because you can take
everyone agrees on stats.
Yeah, you can manipulate them in all sorts of different ways.
For sure. All right. So let's manipulate this conversation forward to Ben Saraf, who is a guy that I started out the season like super duper high on.
You and me.
I am probably the lowest on him now at no ceilings for different reasons, but this is a guy that makes me feel that I have to question my scouting technique and like what I'm looking at in a lot of ways because there's a lot to like. But Ben Saraf plays for Ratio Farm, perimeter player. I think he could probably play 3 positions in the NBA if everything kind of hits right. 200 pounds, only 18 years old, playing in that professional league, averaging about 13 points per game, 2 rebounds, almost 5 assists, just a tick over 0 blocks per game, 1.3 steals per game, about 42, 22, and 78 shooting splits, 2.5 turnovers per game, just over 2 fouls per game. Bryce, where are you at with Ben Saraf, and why did you want to talk about him today?
Yeah, so I had him really high at one point. Like Saraf was like top 10, definite lottery for me. I have him down in the 20s now. And to me, like I have him now penciled in as like a third guard, maybe even high level fourth guard. I'm with you. I think he has some positional versatility. I just struggle because like he's an all around creative offensive player. Like I love the emotion he plays with. Again, common theme here. I just don't know what to think about the jump shots. I mean, like there's some really bad misses. I'm sure you'll give us the numbers. I'm hoping maybe there's some numbers in there that will make me feel better.
There's some encouraging catch and shoot numbers.
There you go. Strong left-hand driver. So everybody brings up how left-hand dominant Jace Richardson is, which is true. Yeah. Saraf has that as well. Right hand is definitely an issue. Driving, finishing, passing. But man, he uses his body. Like he'll give the bump. He has balance. He finds contact to create space. They can create separation. He can decelerate. He has creative and interesting passing. All of that stuff. Defensively, I think he has activity and energy. He's gonna be a fascinating defensive scout to track because I'm interested to see like how teams value. I think he can cause some disruption. I think he can be aggressive. Our team's going to play into that. Are they going to try to take that away and make him more solid? Going back to the summer, I thought he had some good point of attack possessions where it was like fundamentally sound point of attack defense where he just gives his chest, stays in front. So the defense will be interesting. But again, another guy where it's like, okay, is he going to make enough shots for all of this other stuff to really matter? Because if he really shoots it, Steven, this is a really, like, I think he really is like a high level third guard, like 6-man, guard off your bench that does what you want from your 6-man.
Yeah, almost kind of in like a Ty Jerome ilk,
Sure.
what we're seeing with Cleveland this year. He might be one of those 82 game players and not a 16 game player for what we're seeing right now, but kind of similar. You brought up the shot, right? And if you look at the percentages, they're not great. They're only 22%. Digging into a little bit more, he's a better off-ball guy, and I think someone in the chat said it was AA said, "What does Saraf do on the ball? Big issues defensively too." Shout out to everybody watching, listening, contributing in the chat. Off the ball, he ranked in the 77th percentile on catch and shoot jumpers. He shot 37% when guarded on catch and shoot looks, and over 41% on catch and shoot looks. So there is a little bit of that kind of Malcolm Brogdon-y type component that might exist with a Ben Saraf there. He was in the 50th percentile at the rim, and he was in the 56th percentile in at rim frequency. So you're kind of seeing, even though he's an 18-year-old playing in this professional league, high quality games and stuff like that, he's still got ways to go developmentally, physically, but he's not letting that impact his, attacking prowess on the ball. Now, what concerns me on the ball is that he was only in the 33rd percentile on dribble jumpers, just shot over 16% on dribble jumper threes. And I think if you're going to dominate on ball, you have to be able to shoot kind of off of your own creation, even if you're in a pick and roll set, let's say high pick and roll, you're dribbling off of movement, you still got to get into that jump shot, right? Yeah. So those are some of the concerns that I have. He does move well off the ball, as most European prospects do. You do have to show that kind of cutting, zagging, screen setting, rolling, and all that stuff. And then defensively, he is intriguing because, like you mentioned, Bryce, he does show those disruptive habits. I just want to put this nugget out there for people. He had 66 stocks, that's combined steals and blocks, to 103 fouls committed. Now, again, professional league. He's learning, he's growing, he's playing against professional basketball players, not amateurs, right? All of that in a blender kind of still has me uncertain. And I think it's the on-ball juice that he is probably projected to have that I'm the most skeptical on.
I mean, that's why he fell out of the lot. Like early on, I was like, okay, this is like an on-ball creator. Like this dude is creating more separation on the ball than anybody else in the class. Like, how can I not have that ranked high? Well, doesn't matter if you can create separation if you can't pay it off with putting the ball in the basket. Now, again, there's growth and potential and all of those things. And that's why I still have him as a first-round pick, because I just think not everybody can create that separation. Like, that's the other aspect of it as well. Like, who cares if you can make a mid-range jumper off the dribble if you can't create the separation to do so, and he has the decel, he has the body control, he has all of those things. Now he has to make shots. Again, I'm with you on the defense. It's very interesting to me what, I missed on guys like that too. Like, I missed on Tari Eason because I thought he just took chances all the time, and I wasn't high on his defense, and I ended up being wrong on that. And so I've tried to be a little bit more respectful that the NBA game is about disrupting the offense and guys that can create those things. Now, like you said, there's, the fouls came along with it. So how good is he going to be at doing that? And that's why I think Saraf is a great value at the end of the first round. It's like that's where, as I move, this is where I came to like this draft more and more as I found a Carter Bryant and felt comfortable moving him into my top 10, and Neat Clifford into my lottery, and Danny Wolf into my top 15. And then
Cedric Coward?
Okay. We almost talked about Cedric Coward. I don't have him that high, but I love Cedric. Coward's definitely in my first round.
Okay.
But what that allowed me to do was take a Ben Saraf and move him down into the 20s And it's like, okay, well now I love him here. Like this is great value for a guy like that. Now that I found some of these other guys, Cedric Coward's so good, man.
We probably shouldn't pull that string any farther, or that'll be another 30 minutes just on him.
That is correct.
Yeah. All right. So the last prospect that we are going to discuss today, Bryce, the last guy that you sent me, Egor Demin, very contentious prospect across all of the draft community right now. He is the 6'8", 6'9" kind of perimeter player. There was the conversation, he's absolutely a lead guard, and now it's like he's a creative swingman. So that has kind of taken place within his prospect breakdown. But 19 years old, almost 11 points per game, 4 boards, over 5 assists, almost half a block, over 1 steal, shooting splits of just 41, 27, and 70. I'll round up. 2.9 turnovers per game and 1.2 fouls per game. Talk to me about Egor Demin, Bryce. What do we got?
So I had Egor really high at one time, just, even before the season. And then, he got off to this hot start, and, he vaulted into top 10, top 5. So here's what I struggle. Maybe this is just my inability to see it. So I think he offensively, it's like he runs a ball screen or he's not that valuable offensively. And that worries me a little bit. Although I will say this is a team specific thing, kind of like with Queen as well. If you can, I could see him in the top 20 for me, even if it's a team that runs a ton of ball screens. It's like, if this is what your offense is solely built, I don't think he makes sense on the Golden State Warriors, right? Because they're not they're not going to put him in a ton of ball screen stuff. Now, maybe he turns into the Andre Iguodala of that system, right? But
Rashawn Livingston.
Yeah, that could be. But I also am I want to stay on this because then I want to get into he's a wing thing. So if he's an on the ball
very important conversation for his projection.
Yes. It is. And I need to, maybe you will talk me into it because I'm struggling. Okay. But I think if he ends up in a ball screen heavy offense, maybe a pace offense, something like Chicago really pushes pace, right? And that's not going to make sense because they have Giddey. But
and Matas.
And if he ends up in a situation like that, I could understand him really returning value. I just think that's the role he has to be in. I think that's where he returns value to a team, is super, super heavy ball screen / pace transition stuff, because that's all I really believe in. Even I think the 3-point percentage that's even where it's the best, is as a pick and roll handler. I have it at where was it at? 36% the last time I looked on Synergy. I don't know if that's up to date, but defensively, I think he's fine. Maybe I don't think he's overly impactful though.
Pretty thin.
Yeah. And so listen, he's an incredible passer, but again, it's a lot of, how does he create advantages to show that if it's not by using a ball screen? And so maybe I've locked in on something and I can't get my mind anywhere else, but my mind just goes to ball screen offense, success. Anything else, I struggle to see the path unless he turns into a wing, which I cannot wait to have that conversation.
Yes, because even if he's like this Hedo Turkoglu wing, that I think that's going to be kind of like the comp if he's all of a sudden a wing now. The shooting isn't there. He did shoot a lot. He shot almost 10 threes per 100 possessions. So there is some confidence both in him and the coaching staff, because you're not shooting 10 threes per game if not only you, but the coach is like, you go, I mean, Bryce, you know this. If you got the green light, then go out and shoot it, right?
Yep.
And that's what I think is going to be the swing skill. Obviously, we see this with a lot of wing prospects coming in. How do you shoot? Like TJ Salon last year, prime example, very hypothetical, rangy, athletic guy. How can he shoot, and can he physically hold up? He was in the 75th percentile at finishing at the rim, which kind of gives you some confidence if you are a little bit of skeptical on the frame like I am, right?
Sure.
He was only in the 31st percentile in catch and shoot looks. His best shooting percentage came on guarded looks, and he only shot over 33%. He had 6 half-court dunks, which, again, gives you a little bit of affirmation if you believe in the frame moving forward. He was only in the 57th percentile in pick and roll sets as a scorer. You include passes, that leaps up into the 73rd percentile, right?
Makes sense.
This is where you have the guard versus wing conversation, in my opinion, Bryce, is if he is not a guard, like how you said, I think you put it perfectly. I think like that's the perfect summation of his projection. He is most valuable with the ball in his hand. How many teams are looking for a guy that needs the ball in their hands to succeed, who's also a developmental shooter while also having a kind of hypothetical frame right now?
Yeah, I think that's why I end up with him where I do, where I still see him in the lottery for some people, and like that's cool. It's just for me, I think his value ends up being probably like your backup primary initiator, right? And I can see him being really successful in that. 20 minutes a night, he's running your offense again, whether it's transition, ball screen heavy, whatever. And that's great. I guess I'm just a little bit lower on that in terms of like, I'm not the Nets taking that at 7 or whatever, as he's the future primary creator for my team or something.
But that might be his best avenue to explore that type of potential in his game, though.
That is fair, sure. And so then it comes down like, as the Nets, are you willing to take that chance, right? Of like, so that's where I'm at. I also feel like I was trying to look up BYU's like 3-point percentage this year, because I feel like he also, like a lot of times we talk about like spacing for college players, not having great spacing and stuff like that. So they were 41st in the country. They're 37% from three. I don't
Richie
feel like
Saunders was insane. From
deep. Yeah. And so like that's where I'm like, he actually got to play in a system, I feel like, where spacing was decent. He had floor spacers around him, like bigs,
rim running big man,
running bigs. And so like he actually did get to play in a context where it's like, okay, this could, really showcase his skills, where some guys, it's like, I remember the Jaden Ivey thing was, well, how's he ever supposed to get to the rim when there's two big guys on the floor and they're always posting up in the lane, that wasn't necessarily the offensive system Egor would, and that's not his fault. I'm just saying that's not something that you can say against it. So can we have the wing conversation? I am fascinated to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, just real quick, Cosmo in the chat says, yes, Egor finishes well at the rim, but doesn't get there often enough. I talked about how he was in the 75th percentile at the rim. He was in the 40th percentile in at-rim frequency. Now, as a freshman at his frame, I feel like that's like almost a perfect polarizing number to where you can be like, look, man, like he's still getting to the rim and finishing. But then there's like he's 6'8", 6'9", and is supposed to be this guard who can attack the rim. Why is it not more frequent? So I think that we can use that as our kind of launching point to get into the conversation. Bryce, where are you at with the guard versus kind of swing man conversation right now?
Yeah, I guess my thing is I'm looking for the answer of like, where has this been successful? Because here's what I think is easy to say, harder to do. It's hard to change a player's mentality. Egor just spent a whole college basketball season playing with the ball in his hands. I assume Egor looks at himself for how, I don't know how, like, I don't know his whole like basketball journey as a primary initiator. It is much harder to say, hey, go stand in the corner and you'll get the ball when you get the ball and then attack off of that. It's way harder to do that, I think, than what people think sometimes. It's not easy to shift that mentality. And in the same way, it's not easy to do it the other way of if you've always been this like off-ball player that runs off screens. Okay, well now go run ball screens. And not only is he trying to shift his mentality, he's doing it from BYU to the NBA now against, a jumping competition. So like, I always have questions about that when people say, well, just go play a different role. That's not easy to do. And then it's just like, what? So I put a name. It's like, is the idea a Jake LaRavia? Like, is that the type of guy we're talking about here where it's like, okay, now as an off the ball player, the passing is a crazy plus. He could operate a second side thing. The shooting is good enough to keep advantages. Now, LaRavia is an underrated defender.
Yes.
Egor isn't even close to that yet, but is that what we're looking at whenever we're talking about this wingy type archetype?
I love the LaRavia shout too, because LaRavia wasn't a freshman going into the NBA. He took several years to
Yeah.
get to the point, and it took him multiple stops too, right? Like,
Yes.
he had to play in different contexts to be able to play this out, and I think that's key when he's playing alongside of Alondas Williams, where Alondas was the primary creator, and then LaRavia, like as this kind of swing 3-4, could go out there and supplement the offense. I think that is where I could see Egor providing immense value. One, because of what I was saying earlier, almost like this scarcity of need for him to come in and be the offensive guy. How many NBA teams right now look at Egor Demin and say, yes, let's build around you being the guy? It even took Josh Giddey several years at Oklahoma City before, as like the supplemental guy running with Shea and Chris Paul and a lot of other more dominant on-ball guys, to then all of a sudden go and do that shift. Now, I will say, Bryce, I was listening to an interview that he did with Jonathan Givony of ESPN and Draft Express, where he's at least saying the right things. Like, he's at least saying that he is comfortable kind of playing whatever role an NBA team needs him to. And he's, of course, we're in empty gym shooting season right now, where the jumper looks great, and it's falling in like these kind of movement shots and stuff like that. No defense, right? But I think those are all interesting points to bring up. I think, like you though, I'm more in the camp of he's got to learn how to play off of other people who are more on ball dominant for me to feel comfortable. And the shot's really it. I mean, we saw it with Josh Giddey this year. Jumper hits, everything else starts to make sense.
Yeah. No, I mean, and that's, to me, my point with Jake LaRavia was, okay, let's say he becomes the Jake LaRavia type player. And listen, for people, like, this isn't a knock on him. Some people may not be as familiar with LaRavia, and, right, like Memphis didn't, exercise his option, and then they had to come back and say that was a mistake. Like, Kleiman literally said in his end of season interview that it was a mistake not to do it. But like, Jake LaRavia is a quality NBA rotation basketball player. And so, like, if you disagree with me, then at least live in that world for this comp. I guess my point is, to me, that's still probably like in the 20s, late teens, first round value. That's not a lottery pick to me. So even if he would successfully make this kind of transition to that archetype of player, a couple of, like, Chris Dunn was like this, he's different body type. Dunn's a little bit shorter, and then Dunn's incredible defensively. So, like, that's the big thing as well. When you're this archetype, the defense has to be impactful, almost even better than just neutral. But to me, that's end of the teens, top of the 20, that's the type of range you would take this player. And so I think that's why I've settled in where I have him on my board.
And I think that the thing that NBA teams are going to have the internal discussions on, I'm sure they already are, so who'd you rather have, Kasper Giakoušonis or Egor Demin? Because you're not only competing with yourself and like where you feel like you can be valuable, but are you more comfortable with what you saw from Giakoušonis this year as like the lead guy on a team that has other kind of NBA style skill sets, Yeah.
Kasparis is an interesting one as well. And I had somebody reach out to me after, again, we did the mock, because, like, Kasparis' big thing is the turnovers. And they reached out and they're like, well, Bryce, who's the last player that failed because of turnovers? I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like, who is the last college player who had college turnover issues and then that caused them to be unsuccessful in the NBA? I was like, I don't have the answer. I don't know. It would be interesting. I know you're awesome at Bart Torvik. Maybe I can talk you into doing a query over there on that. I mean,
sounds like a good article idea.
There you go. Like Cade Cunningham was a name that came up because he had turnover issues at college and they've persisted in the NBA. But my counter to that was, Cade is way better at everything else than Kasparis, though. Like, so the fact that Cade turns the ball over all the time, it's okay. It's not okay. It's subsidized by the fact that he does all of this other stuff at a high level that Kasparis simply doesn't. And so it's this interesting conversation. Same thing with Danny Wolf and his turnovers.
Yeah, and Cade shot like 10%, if not higher, from deep than both of the guys that we were just talking about. But Bryce, man, great conversation. I really appreciate you making some time this morning. I know you got a busy day ahead of you, man, and I know that you were up late last night, so it means a lot that you're still willing to come on and talk draft with me, man. So before I let you out of here, just want to say thank you. Love seeing the work that you're doing. I'm sure everybody knows, but could you at least humor me and let people know where they can find you and your work?
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate it. I had a blast. Thank you so much for having me on. Got to go take care of the lawn before everything else today. Priorities, right? So,
yep.
At Motor City Hoops on Twitter, on Blue Sky, Motor City Hoops Substack. That's mostly Piston stuff. Any of my draft content, I'll either tweet out or it's over on Game Theory. As Steven mentioned, if you're super into these playoffs, if you happen to be a Knicks fan and you haven't, doing some breakdowns over on the Knicks Film School YouTube channel, exclusively over there under the videos tab. Pistons Pulse podcast, that's exclusively Pistons content. And then Game Theory, where we're breaking down the playoffs. We'll have a live mock after the lottery on Monday and everything else. So Game Theory podcast with Sam Vecenie there. As always, No Ceilings doing big things. You guys are always there when we're using the Fanspo mock draft simulator with your guys' big board. So you guys are everywhere doing awesome things, and super excited for you guys.
Man, that means a lot, Bryce. Thank you so much. And it has been really cool, like seeing like you and Sam like use the Fanspo. That's been really neat to see this year, man. But as for us, you can follow us on all of our socials at No Ceilings NBA. Like Bryce, we're going to kind of have like these dueling at post lottery mock drafts and stuff like that. You'll be able to catch ours on our YouTube and podcast feed as well. While you're here watching, please hit us with a thumbs up. Thank you all for subscribing. We're approaching 15,000 followers on YouTube this year. And if you're on the podcast feed, do that. Go to noceilingsnba.com for all of our written work. We're one of the fastest rising Substack reads that you're going to see in the Substack community as well, as shown by the rising charts that they have there. So thank everybody for supporting that. But for myself, for Bryce, and for the No Ceilings team, we will catch you all next time. Much love, y'all.